She thought it would be just another flight, quiet, ordinary, uneventful, a chance to close her eyes and finally rest. But in the middle of the sky, everything changed. The calm hum of the engines broke when the captain's trembling voice echoed through the cabin, asking a question no one ever expects to hear. Fear spread like wildfire, and all eyes turned toward her. Why her? Why now? What happened next would uncover far more than an in-flight emergency. It revealed a truth about race, power, and the terrifying ways they collide. But here's the part no one saw coming. The entire cabin would soon turn against her before she could even open her mouth. For her, flying was nothing new. Long hours, tight schedules, and endless travel had become part of her routine. She was a young Black woman chasing her dreams, working hard, often exhausted and constantly proving herself in spaces where she was never fully welcomed. On this particular day, the plane seat felt like a small gift. Finally, she could rest, even just for a few hours above the clouds. She closed her eyes, unaware of what awaited her. The cabin was calm, filled with the soft murmur of passengers settling in. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, offering smiles and drinks. It all felt ordinary, so ordinary, in fact, that no one could have predicted how quickly that peace would shatter. But as she drifted off, a storm was building, one she couldn't see, one that had nothing to do with turbulence or weather. It was the kind of storm that comes when prejudice, fear, and power collide in a single moment. Somewhere in the cockpit, a decision was about to be made. A decision that would pull her, without warning, into the center of a crisis that was bigger than her, bigger than the flight itself. And when her name was called, the world inside that plane would never be the same again. Because sometimes the most ordinary day becomes the moment that changes everything. At first, it was nothing more than a slight change in tone. The captain's calm voice, steady, professional now, carried an edge, a sharpness that cut through the hum of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, pausing longer than usual. "This is an unusual request." The passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, waiting for what would come next. Then it dropped like a stone. "If there is any fighter pilot on board, please make yourself known." The cabin fell silent. Drinks froze mid-air. Conversation stopped. People glanced at each other, eyes wide, whispering, unsure if they had heard correctly. A fighter pilot? Here? Why would a commercial flight need one? She stirred from her sleep, confused, catching only fragments of the announcement. But what she did notice were the eyes, dozens of them, slowly turning in her direction. Murmurs rippled through the rows, subtle at first, then growing louder, clearer, unmistakable. "Isn't she military?" Someone whispered. "I think I saw her in uniform once." Why is the captain asking for her? She wasn't a fighter pilot. She wasn't even military. But in the eyes of the passengers, one thing was clear. She was different. And when fear mixes with difference, suspicion follows like a shadow. With every passing second, the whispers grew sharper, twisting into something much more dangerous. The whispers hardened into stares, and stares into judgment. Every movement she made, reaching for her bag, glancing at the window, was suddenly scrutinized. The same seat that had felt like a sanctuary now felt like a spotlight, burning her with the weight of strangers' assumptions. The captain repeated the call. His voice, now tense, rattled through the cabin speakers. And with each repetition, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to fear. Why isn't she standing up? What's she hiding? She looks guilty. Her heart pounded. She wanted to speak, to explain, to say, "I'm not who you think I am." But before she could, a man 2 rows ahead stood abruptly. "I've seen this before," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. They stay quiet until it's too late. And just like that, her silence wasn't just silence, it was guilt. Her calm wasn't just calm, it was threat. She was no longer a tired passenger trying to get home. She had become the villain in a story she never asked to be part of. The flight attendants moved closer, their once polite smiles replaced by unease. One leaned toward her with forced calmness. "Ma'am, can you step with us?" Just for a moment, it wasn't a request. It was a demand wrapped in politeness. And as she stood, the cabin erupted into hushed commentary, every pair of eyes following her every step down the narrow aisle. Her legs shook, not from turbulence, but from the crushing realization she was no longer safe in the very space meant to protect her. Thousands of feet above the ground, trapped in a metal tube with nowhere to go, she understood the terrible truth. Her skin had already told her story before she ever could, but the worst was still ahead. Because at the front of the plane, a far more devastating accusation was waiting for her dot at the front of the plane. The air felt thinner, sharper, every sound magnified. The hum of the engines, the shuffle of restless passengers, the clipped footsteps of flight attendants circling like guards. She stood there, trembling, yet refusing to bow her head. The captain finally emerged from the cockpit. His face was pale, his eyes scanning her as though she carried both the problem and the solution. "We've received reports," he said carefully, his voice low but carrying weight. "You match the description of someone dangerous." Her stomach dropped. Dangerous? She was a woman traveling home with nothing but a small carry-on and a heart still pounding from interrupted sleep. But to them, her skin, her silence, her very presence was enough to ignite fear. The whispers behind her grew louder, uglier. "She's hiding something. She's lying. Get her off this plane." Each word stabbed deeper, turning a cabin of strangers into a courtroom with no judge, just a jury of fear and prejudice. She tried to speak, but her words dissolved under the weight of their stares. She raised her hand slowly, her voice cracking. "I am not who you think I am," but no explanation mattered. The verdict had already been written on her skin, and that's when the scariest truth hit her. The real danger wasn't outside the plane, it was the people trapped inside with her. The captain hesitated, then motioned to security officers waiting near the galley. They stepped forward, hands hovering near their belts. The aisle closed in. Her knees weakened. Thousands of feet above the ground, she realized she was cornered not by turbulence, not by threat, but by a system that saw danger where there was none. And as the officers reached for her arm, the cabin held its breath. One wrong move, one misunderstanding, and this flight would end not in headlines about safety, but in tragedy. The officers searched her bag, her seat, even her passport, finding nothing but a tired woman who wanted only to reach her destination. No weapons, no threats, no secrets, just exhaustion. Slowly, reluctantly, they stepped back. The captain cleared his throat, mumbling about a misunderstanding, but the damage was already done. She walked back to her seat under the crushing weight of silence. No apology from the passengers whose whispers branded her guilty. No comfort from the crew who had treated her like a suspect. Just stares, some relieved, others still suspicious, as if her innocence was temporary, conditional. But what lingered wasn't the search itself. It was the truth revealed in that cabin. How quickly fear turned to accusation. How easily a crowd chose prejudice over patience. To them, she was never just a woman on a plane. She was a threat before she was a person, and that's when it hit her. The real danger wasn't the flight at all. It was the lesson it carried about the world waiting below Dot when the wheels touched the ground. She carried more than her luggage. She carried the memory of humiliation, the knowledge that even in the skies far above the world, racism still found a way to rise higher. And that realization would never leave her, because this wasn't only her story. It was the story of countless others who've been singled out, silenced, or shamed simply for existing in the wrong skin. A reminder that racism doesn't always shout, it whispers, it stares, it assumes. It spreads quietly until it becomes dangerous. So the question remains, how many more flights? How many more classrooms? How many more streets will become battlegrounds for dignity? How many more times must someone prove their innocence before they are seen as human? Her story forces us to face a truth too many try to ignore. Racism doesn't need proof to destroy, it only needs silence. And the longer we stay silent, the louder it grows.